Marcus Cole's hands trembled as he cradled his dying golden retriever Bailey in his arms, blood seeping through his fingers. 3 burglars had broken into his Connecticut home, thinking it was just another wealthy target. They were wrong. Bailey was his last connection to Sarah, a final gift from his wife before cancer took her. The thugs didn't know who they were dealing with. They couldn't have known that for 15 years, Marcus Cole had been known as the Undertaker, the most feared assassin in the international underground. He had buried that life when he married Sarah, sealed it away with a promise to her. But now, looking into Bailey's fading eyes, that promise shattered. In the basement of his quiet suburban home, behind a false wall, lay an arsenal that hadn't been touched in 3 years. The weapons waited like old friends, calling him back to a world of shadows and violence. As Cole reached for his phone to make one call, a familiar coldness settled over him. The burglars had made 2 fatal mistakes. First, they killed the dog of the world's deadliest assassin. Second, they left him alive to hunt them down. But as Cole would soon discover, this was no random act of violence. Someone had orchestrated this personal attack, and they were about to learn why the Undertaker's reputation was built on more than just rumors. Buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. The morning sun cast long shadows across Marcus Cole's garden, where rows of heirloom tomatoes stretched toward the light. His golden retriever Bailey lay in a patch of grass. Nearby, head resting on paws, watching his master with devoted brown eyes. Marcus worked methodically, his weathered hands moving with precision as he staked each plant. The routine brought him peace, though peace was something he'd spent years learning to accept. 3 houses down, a car door slammed. Marcus registered the sound without looking up. Just as he noted the jogger passing on the sidewalk, the mail truck 2 streets over, and the slight change in Bailey's breathing as the dog tracked a squirrel's movement in the oak tree. Old habits refused to die, even here in suburban Connecticut. Bailey's tail thumped against the ground as Marcus stood, brushing dirt from his knees. The morning's work was done, and it was time for their walk. The same walk they'd taken every morning for 3 years, since Sarah had placed the tiny golden puppy in his arms and made him promise to love something living again. Inside the house, Marcus filled Bailey's water bowl and washed his hands at the kitchen sink. Family photos lined the windowsill above it. Sarah's smile beamed from each one, her face growing progressively thinner in the later images, but her eyes never losing their light. The last photo showed her in the hospital, Bailey curled beside her on the bed, her hand buried in his fur. Marcus dried his hands and reached for Bailey's leash hanging by the door. The dog was already waiting, practically vibrating with excitement. As Marcus clipped the leash to Bailey's collar, his fingers brushed the small metal tag engraved with Sarah's favorite quote, "Love heals all wounds." Their route took them past manicured lawns and carefully tended gardens, through a neighborhood where everyone knew Marcus Cole as the quiet widower who dealt in rare books, a respectable profession for a man who wanted to be left alone with his grief. The story held up well enough. He did maintain a small collection of valuable first editions in his study, and he knew enough about them to conduct the occasional legitimate sale. The real business was conducted in the basement, behind a false wall that concealed a room full of memories he'd tried to bury. Weapons, passports, currency from 24 countries, tools of a trade he'd walked away from when he met Sarah. She'd known what he was, who he had been. The Undertaker, they'd called him. The man you sent when you needed someone to disappear permanently. She'd loved him anyway, believed he could be more than his violence. Bailey's sudden tension brought Marcus back to the present. The dog had stopped, ears forward, staring at Mrs. Chen's house across the street. The elderly woman was struggling with several grocery bags as she made her way up her front steps. "Come on, boy," Marcus said softly, leading Bailey across the street. Mrs. Chen's face lit up when she saw them approaching. "Mr. Cole, Bailey, good morning," she called out. She had been Sarah's best friend, had sat with her through chemotherapy sessions when Marcus was away on his last few jobs before retiring completely. "Let me help you with those, Mrs. Chen," Marcus said, taking the bags from her trembling hands. Bailey sat perfectly still as Mrs. Chen scratched behind his ears. "Such a gentleman, just like his master," she said. "Sarah would be proud of you both." Marcus managed a small smile as he carried the groceries into her kitchen. The comment was, "Would Sarah Sarah be proud of the arsenal he still maintained, of the skills he kept sharp through daily training sessions in his basement? She had made him promise to leave that life behind, but some part of him had never fully let go. Back home, Marcus settled into his study to handle some actual rare book business. Bailey dozed in a patch of sunlight while Marcus catalogued recent acquisitions and responded to client inquiries. The work was genuine enough, though the profit margins were far less than what he'd once commanded for his other services. A notification on his phone reminded him of dinner at the Hendersons that evening. Tom Henderson had been trying to set him up with his sister for months, unable to accept that Marcus had no interest in dating. How could he explain that Sarah hadn't just been his wife, she'd been his salvation? She'd shown him a life beyond violence, beyond the cold efficiency of contract killing. Dating someone new felt like a betrayal of everything she'd given him. The afternoon passed quietly. Marcus prepared Bailey's dinner and his own simple meal. As he washed the dishes, he watched the sun setting through his kitchen window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sarah had loved this time of day. She'd often sit in the garden with a glass of wine, Bailey at her feet, watching the colors change. The Hendersons' house was only a few doors down. Marcus gave Bailey a final pat before heading out, leaving the dog with his favorite toy and the television tuned to Animal Planet for company. The security system was armed, cameras monitoring every approach to the house. Standard precautions, he told himself, though he knew they went far beyond what any normal rare book dealer would install. Tom Henderson greeted him with enthusiastic backslapping and immediately tried to steer him toward his sister Jenny, who had been positioned strategically near the appetizers. Marcus deflected politely, engaging Tom's wife in a conversation about her garden instead. He was acutely aware of movement around him, categorizing each party guest as a potential threat out of habit, noting exits and improvisational weapons. An hour into the party, his phone buzzed. The security system, motion detected in the backyard. Marcus excused himself and stepped onto the Hendersons' back porch, pulling up the camera feed on his phone. 3 figures moved through his garden, their movements suggesting professional training. They wore dark clothes and carried tools that weren't meant for gardening. Marcus's chest tightened. Bailey was alone in the house. He quickly made his excuses to Tom and walked calmly toward home, his pace increasing with each step. The security feed showed the intruders had already breached the back door. They were inside. Then he heard it, a single gunshot that shattered the quiet suburban evening. Marcus Cole sprinted through his back garden, past the carefully tended tomato plants, now trampled by heavy boots. His front door hung open, splintered around the lock. The house was silent, too silent. The familiar sound of Bailey's nails clicking on hardwood was absent. Blood marked the floor in the entryway, dark droplets leading toward the living room. Marcus followed the trail, his movements automatic, his mind sliding into a familiar cold clarity he hadn't accessed in years. The television still played Animal Planet, its cheerful narration a grotesque backdrop to the scene before him. Bailey lay on his side near the couch, breathing in shallow gasps. Blood matted his golden fur, spreading across the hardwood floor. When he saw Marcus, his tail thumped weakly against the ground once, twice. Marcus knelt beside him, hands moving gently over the dog's body to assess the damage. Single gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet had gone through, leaving an exit wound that pumped blood with each labored breath. Fatal. Marcus had seen enough death to know there was no coming back from this. "I'm here, boy," he whispered, gathering Bailey into his arms. The dog whimpered softly, trying to lick Marcus's hand. "I'm so sorry, I should have been here." Bailey's eyes fixed on Marcus's face, filled with the same unconditional love they'd held since Sarah first placed him in Marcus's arms. "He'll help you remember how to love," she had said from her hospital bed. "Promise me you'll let him." Marcus had promised. He'd promised her so many things. That he'd leave the violence behind, that he'd build a new life, that he'd learn to live in the light instead of the shadows. Bailey had been his anchor to those promises, his daily reminder of the man Sarah believed he could be. The dog's breathing grew more labored. Marcus held him closer, one hand pressed against the wound, as if he could somehow hold Bailey's life in place. "Stay with me," he whispered. But he was losing this battle just as he'd lost Sarah. He could only watch as Bailey's eyes began to dim, the loyal heart that had helped heal. Marcus sat there for a long time, holding Bailey's cooling body, his mind cataloguing every detail of the crime scene around him. Professional job. 3 men, based on the boot prints in the garden. They'd known how to disable the exterior cameras, though they'd missed the backup system. random. They'd come prepared to deal with a dog. The shot had been deliberate, not panicked. Police sirens approached. A neighbor must have heard the gunshot. Marcus gently laid Bailey's body down and stood, his clothes stained with blood. He needed to be Marcus Cole, the rare book dealer now, the grieving widower whose dog was killed in a burglary. He could not be the other man, the one whose fingers itched for familiar weapons, whose mind was already calculating trajectories of vengeance. The police were professional but detached, just another break-in in an affluent neighborhood. They took photos, collected evidence, asked routine questions. Yes, he'd been at a neighbor's party. No, he hadn't seen anything suspicious earlier. No, he didn't know who might want to target him. Looks like they were after valuables, one officer said, gesturing to the ransacked study. The dog probably surprised them. These things happen, unfortunately. These things happen. As if Bailey had been just a dog, as if this had been just a burglary. Marcus nodded numbly, playing his role, but his mind was already accessing old files, old memories. The way they'd breached his security suggested training. The precision of the killing shot spoke of experience. This hadn't been random. After the police left, Marcus stood in his study, looking at the destruction. Books lay scattered across the floor, his desk drawers emptied, but it was what they hadn't touched that interested him. The true valuables, his first editions locked in a concealed safe, remained untouched. They hadn't even looked for them. He walked to his bedroom, opened his closet, and pressed against a seemingly solid back wall. It slid aside silently, revealing a narrow staircase. The basement room was exactly as he'd left it 3 years ago. Weapons lined the walls. Guns, knives, garrotes, passports and currency from dozens of countries filled a fireproof safe. Everything a ghost would need to move through the world unseen. Marcus activated his private security terminal, accessing the backup camera footage. He froze on a frame showing one of the intruders. There, on the man's neck, a distinctive tattoo peeked above his collar, a double-headed eagle clutching a crown. Marcus knew that mark. Bratva, Russian organized crime. His phone lay heavy in his hand as he scrolled through contacts he'd hoped never to use again. He selected one and pressed call. It rang twice before connecting. "Who the hell is this?" a gruff voice demanded. "It's the Undertaker," Marcus said, the old name feeling like ashes in his mouth. "I need information." A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Word was, "You retired." "I did. Someone just made me reconsider." Silence stretched for a moment. "What do you need?" "Everything you have on Bratva operations in Connecticut. Specifically, anyone sporting a double-headed eagle tattoo." "Jesus, you're really back." Marcus looked at Bailey's blood drying on his clothes, thought of Sarah's final gift lying dead upstairs. "Yes," he said quietly, "I'm back." He ended the call and stood in the center of his arsenal, surrounded by the tools of his former life. Sarah had made him promise to leave this behind, to be better than his violence. But Sarah was gone, and now Bailey was gone too, killed by men who had no idea what they were awakening. Marcus moved to a steel cabinet and opened it, revealing a perfectly pressed black suit. His fingers traced the fabric. The last time he'd worn this, he'd been ending a life. Now it would help him begin something else entirely, a reckoning. Upstairs, he tenderly wrapped Bailey's body in a blanket. Tomorrow, he would bury him properly, next to Sarah's garden, where the dog had spent so many happy hours. But tonight, he had work to do. The police would look for burglars. Marcus would look for something else. He would look for the truth behind this carefully orchestrated attack, and he would make sure everyone responsible understood exactly what it meant to target the things he loved. In his study, Marcus cleaned up the scattered books with mechanical precision. When he reached his desk, he lifted a framed photo of Sarah and Bailey from the floor, brushing away fragments of broken glass. They smiled up at him from a sunny afternoon in the garden. Caught in a moment of perfect happiness, he set the photo carefully on his desk, positioned so he could see it clearly. "I'm sorry," he whispered to them both, "but some promises have to be broken to keep others." The Red Lion Bar crouched in the industrial outskirts of Hartford, a cinder-block fortress with neon signs promising cheap beer and questionable company. Parked car across the street, watching patrons stumble in and out through the grimy entrance. His contact's information had led him here, to a gathering place for local muscle working under Bratva protection. The black suit felt familiar. familiar, against his skin, like armor he'd never truly shed. In the passenger seat lay a manila envelope containing photos from his security footage, showing the eagle tattoo that marked his target. The man's face wasn't visible, but Marcus had worked with less. Inside the bar, cigarette smoke hung thick in the air, despite state laws against indoor smoking. Marcus moved through the crowd like a shadow, noting exits, counting weapons poorly concealed under leather jackets. The bartender's eyes tracked him, recognizing a predator even if he couldn't identify which one. Marcus chose a booth with clear sightlines to both the front and back entrances. A waitress approached, her practiced smile faltering as she met his gaze. "Vodka, neat," he said quietly, "and information about this man." He slid one of the photos across the sticky table. She glanced at it, then back at him. "I just serve drinks." Marcus placed $500 on the photo. "Now you serve information." Her eyes widened at the money. She touched the tattoo in the photo. "That's Mikhail's crew. They come in most nights after 11. The vodka arrived untouched. At 11:15, the front door swung open and 4 men entered, their presence causing a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Marcus studied them through the mirror behind the bar. Designer clothes that couldn't quite hide their thuggish nature. The leader's neck bore the eagle tattoo. Marcus waited until they settled at their usual table, waited until they were on their second round of drinks. Then he stood, straightened his suit jacket, and walked deliberately toward them. The closest man noticed him first, his hand sliding toward his waistband. "Gentlemen," Marcus said softly, "I believe we have business to discuss." The tattooed man, Mikhail, looked up with annoyed amusement that froze when he met Marcus's eyes. Recognition flickered across his face. "Undertaker," he whispered. The man reaching for his gun never completed the motion. Marcus moved with liquid grace, breaking the man's wrist and using his body as a shield against his companions. The bar erupted into chaos as patrons fled, but Marcus's world had narrowed to the precise application of violence. The second man rushed him with a knife. Marcus redirected the blade into its owner's thigh, then slammed his head into the table hard enough to crack the wood. The third drew a pistol, but never got a shot off. Marcus's elbow crushed his windpipe. Mikhail tried to run. Marcus caught him at the back door, driving him face first into the wall. Around them, the bar had emptied, except for the unconscious bodies of Mikhail's crew. "The break-in," Marcus said, twisting Mikhail's arm until bones creaked. "Who ordered it?" "I do not know what you speak of," Mikhail gasped in heavily accented English. Marcus increased the pressure. "The dog was a message. Who sent it? Please, I am just soldier. I follow orders." "From whom?" Mikhail's resistance crumbled. "Victor Petrov. He say to hit the house, make it look like robbery, kill the dog, send message to ghost from past." Marcus went very still. Victor Petrov, a name he hadn't heard in years, attached to debts he'd thought long settled. "Where is he?" "I do not know. He contact through intermediaries only." "Please, I tell truth." Marcus believed him. He could read truth in the way a body tensed, in the pitch of a voice. Mikhail was a foot soldier, nothing more. But he had confirmed this was no random act. Bailey's death had been ordered by a man Marcus had hoped never to see again. He released Mikhail, who slumped against the wall. "Leave Connecticut," Marcus told him. "Tell anyone who asks that the Undertaker sends his regards." The drive home was silent, his mind processing implications. Victor Petrov had been a rival once, then a reluctant ally, finally an enemy Marcus thought he'd neutralized before meeting Sarah. That he had surfaced now, targeting Bailey specifically, suggested a deeper game. Marcus parked in his garage and made his way to the basement. He pulled up old files, intelligence gathered years ago. Petrov had survived their last encounter, rebuilt his organization. But why wait years to strike? Why target Bailey instead of Marcus directly? The answer lay in Sarah's garden, where Bailey's fresh grave marked the earth. This wasn't about killing Marcus. It was about making him suffer, about destroying the last piece of the life he'd built with Sarah. Marcus stood in his arsenal room, surrounded by the tools of his former trade. On his desk, Sarah and Bailey smiled from their photo. He had tried to honor his promise to her, to leave the violence behind. But Petrov had brought the violence to him, had destroyed something to draw him back into the shadows. Very well, if Petrov wanted the Undertaker, he would have him. Marcus began preparing, selecting weapons with careful precision. But first, he needed more information. He needed to understand why Petrov had chosen this moment to strike. His phone rang, an unlisted number. "I heard about the bar," a woman's voice said. 3 hospitalized, 1 permanent disability. The undertaker's work is distinctive. Who is this? Agent Diana Chen, FBI. We need to talk about Viktor Petrov and why he's targeting retired operators. Marcus's mind shifted, recalculating. What do you mean, operators? You're not the first, Mr. Cole, and if we don't stop him, you won't be the last. May I come in? Marcus looked at the weapons laid out before him, at the photos of Sarah and Bailey. Yes, he said finally. I believe we have much to discuss. Agent Diana Chen sat in Marcus Cole's living room, her FBI badge gleaming on her. He belt. She declined his offer of coffee, her dark eyes scanning the room with professional interest. Marcus noticed how she catalogued the exits, the sight lines, the potential weapons. She moved like someone with tactical training. You're making waves, Mr. Cole, she said. 3 of Mikhail's men will never work again. They killed my dog. They killed a retired operative's last connection to his dead wife on Viktor Petrov's. Orders, let's be precise. Marcus stayed silent, waiting. Chen pulled a tablet from her briefcase and pulled up a series of photos. Each showed a crime scene. Each featured a dead pet. Dogs, cats, even a parrot. 6 incidents in the past month, Chen said, all targeting former operators who retired from various organizations, all staged to look like burglaries or accidents, all killing beloved pets. Why? That's what we're trying to determine. These people share no obvious connection except their former professions, different agencies, different countries, different time periods. The only common thread is that they all crossed paths with Petrov at some point. Marcus studied the photos. You said 6 incidents. How many responded as I did? 4 are actively hunting Petrov now. 1 disappeared completely. The last one committed suicide. The information settled like ice in Marcus's stomach. He's drawing us out. Yes. The question is why? These aren't random targets. Petrov's playing a longer game. Marcus stood and walked to his window, looking out at Sarah's garden. Tell me about the others. Former CIA, ex-Mossad, private contractors, all highly skilled, all retired for love, all lost their spouses to illness or accidents. The pets were their last connections to their old lives. He's isolating us, Marcus said softly, cutting the last ties that kept us human. Chen nodded, creating weapons he can point at targets of his choosing. Grief makes people predictable. You think he's building a team. I think he's creating chaos. 6 of the world's most dangerous operators, all driven back to violence by personal loss. The collateral damage could be catastrophic. Marcus turned back to her. Why tell me this? Because you're different. The others went straight for revenge, burning everything in their path to get to Petrov. You took time to gather intelligence first. You're thinking clearly. I'm planning to kill him just the same. Chen stood, straightening her jacket. I'm not here to stop you, Mr. Cole. I'm here to point you in the right direction. Petrov isn't working alone. Someone's financing this operation. Someone with resources and a grudge against all of you. You know who it is. We have suspicions, but we can't move officially without evidence. That's where you come in. Marcus understood the unspoken offer. You want me to find the proof you need, while keeping the other operators from starting a war that will spill onto civilian streets. Yes. Why should I help you? Chen walked to Sarah's photo on the mantel. Because she wouldn't want her death to trigger more bloodshed. Marcus went very still. What did you say? Sarah's cancer was aggressive, but her decline was suspicious. We've been looking into all the spouses' deaths. There are irregularities. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you deserve to know the whole truth before you decide who to kill. Help us, and I'll give you access to everything we've found. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. If Petrov had anything to do with Sarah's death, then we'll help you end him, legally if possible otherwise. But first, we need to understand the bigger picture. She handed him a secure phone. My direct line. Think about it. After she left, Marcus stood in his study for a long time, looking at Sarah's photo. The possibility that her death hadn't been natural, that someone had orchestrated his pain so precisely, made his blood run cold. His regular phone buzzed, a text from his contact on Petrov's organization. Marcus looked at the secure phone Chen had given him, then at the arsenal in his basement. He could hunt Petrov alone, cut through his organization until he found the truth, or he could work with Chen, gain access to FBI resources, and uncover who was really pulling the strings. Sarah would want him to take the thoughtful path, but Sarah might have been murdered. Marcus picked up Chen's phone and dialed. I'm in, he said when she answered, but but I do this my way. Understood. There's a private jet waiting at Hartford. Airport packed for Boston? Why Boston? Because that's where another operator is about to hit one of Petrov's laundering operations. We need to contain the situation. Marcus grabbed his go bag from the basement. You mean stop them? I mean redirect them. Channel their skills toward our real target. And if they don't want to be redirected, then you do whatever's necessary to prevent civilian casualties. These people respect the Undertaker. Make that mean something. Marcus ended the call and armed his security system. In the garden, Bailey's grave was a fresh mound of earth beside Sarah's roses. I'll find the truth, he promised them both, whatever it takes. The drive to the airport gave him time to think. Chen was right about one thing. Grief made people predictable. It made them reckless, but it could also make them focused, determined, unstoppable. Petrov had started this game thinking he could manipulate broken people into becoming weapons. He was about to learn that some weapons could turn back on their wielder. And if Sarah's death was really murder, then Petrov would learn why the Undertaker's reputation had been built on more than just efficiency. It had been built on the absolute certainty that his targets would never see him coming until it was too late. The private jet cut through night skies toward Boston, giving Marcus time to review the files Chen had sent. His tablet displayed surveillance photos of his target, another retired operator now seeking vengeance. Katya Petrov, former Spetsnaz, turned CIA asset. No relation to Victor, but their histories were intertwined in ways that had left deep scars. Marcus remembered her from a mission in Prague 15 years ago. She'd been legendary for her precision, for making impossible shots under impossible conditions. Now she was hunting the man who'd killed her service dog, a German shepherd that had saved her life in Afghanistan. The file included recent footage of her work. 3 of Petrov's men eliminated in a Moscow nightclub, 2 more in Paris, each kill surgical, each designed to send a message up the chain of command. She was working her way toward Victor methodically, leaving a trail of bodies as breadcrumbs. Memory pulled him back to his own early encounters with Victor Petrov. It had been another life, before Sarah, when Marcus had earned his reputation as the Undertaker. A series of contracts had put him in direct competition with Petrov's organization. Their first meeting had ended in a firefight that left 3 city blocks of Bangkok in flames. The second meeting had been different. Petrov had offered an alliance, a chance to combine their networks for mutual profit. Marcus had accepted, seeing an opportunity to gather intelligence on Petrov's operation from the inside. For 2 years, they'd worked together, their partnership making them both wealthy and veered. Then Marcus had discovered Petrov's side business in human trafficking. The alliance had ended violently. Marcus had dismantled Petrov's trafficking network piece by piece, freeing victims and eliminating key personnel until Petrov himself had been forced to flee with only a fraction of his empire intact. Their final confrontation had taken place in a burning warehouse in Singapore. Marcus had left Petrov alive but broken, believing the man's power was permanently shattered. Clearly, that had been a mistake. The tablet chimed with an update from Chen. Katya had been spotted entering a high-end hotel in downtown Boston. Intelligence suggested she was planning to hit a money laundering operation Petrov ran through the hotel's casino. Marcus closed, his eyes remembering Sarah's face when he'd first told her about his past. She hadn't run. Instead, she'd taken his hand and asked him to choose a different path, to use his skills to protect rather than destroy. He'd promised her, believing he could leave the violence behind. But now, with the possibility that Sarah's death had been orchestrated, that promise felt like ash in his mouth. If Petrov had somehow accelerated her cancer, had taken her from him deliberately as part of this larger game, then no promise could stay his hand. The pilot announced their descent into Boston. Marcus reviewed the hotel's layout one final time. His goal was to prevent Katya from causing civilian casualties while redirecting her skills toward their true target. But first, a larger game was in play. The hotel rose like a glass and steel monolith against the Boston skyline. Marcus entered through the service entrance, his suit and confident bearing making him invisible to the staff. The casino occupied 3 floors, with private gaming rooms on the top level. That's where Petrov's operation would be centered. He spotted Katya at a blackjack table, her evening gown concealing what he knew would be an impressive arsenal. She played with mechanical precision, her eyes constantly scanning the room. She'd aged since Prague, but her predator's grace remained unchanged. Marcus took a seat at the bar, positioning himself where she would notice notice him without drawing attention from others. When her gaze passed over him, he saw the slight widening of her eyes, the minimal tensing of her shoulders. She recognized him. 10 minutes later, she slid onto the bar stool beside him. "The Undertaker," she said softly in Russian. "I thought you retired." "Things change," he replied in the same language. "We need to talk about Viktor Petrov." Her hand moved fractionally toward her thigh, where he knew a blade would be concealed. "I have nothing to say to a man who let that monster live. What if I told you Sarah's death might not have been natural?" That stopped her. "Your wife, the cancer. Agent Chen has evidence suggesting multiple spouses were targeted, all connected to operators who crossed Petrov." Katya's face remained impassive, but Marcus saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. "Why are you here? To stop you from starting a war in this hotel and to offer you a chance at the real target. Victor is the real target. Victor is a puppet. Someone bigger is pulling his strings. Someone with the resources to arrange multiple deaths over years. Someone patient enough to wait until we'd all found peace before taking it away." She studied him for a long moment. The dog was not random. None of them were. 6 operators, all retired, all lost spouses to illness or accidents. All had beloved pets killed recently to draw them back into violence. "Creating weapons," she said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "That's what Chen thinks. But I believe it's simpler than that. I think someone wants us to burn Petrov's organization to the ground, eliminate him completely. Why not do it themselves? Because this way creates chaos, makes it impossible to trace back to the source. We're the perfect weapons, grieving and rage-filled, our actions justified by personal vengeance." Katya signaled the bartender for another drink. "You think Victor knows who is really behind this?" "I think he's terrified. These attacks on us were too precise, too personal. Someone knows details about all of us that should have been buried. So we capture him alive, make him talk." Marcus nodded. "But first, we need to find him. The real him, not the body doubles and false trails he's laying." "I have information," Katya said. "Messages intercepted from this casino's operation, but extracting it will be messy. I have a better way. Chen can get us warrants, make it legal." Katya laughed softly. "You've grown cautious in retirement. I've grown smarter. Charging in weapons free plays into their hands. We need to be precise." She considered this, her fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on her glass. "The dog they killed. He saved my life 3 times in Afghanistan. The last time, he took a bullet meant for me." "I know. Bailey was Sarah's last gift to me, keeping me human when grief would have hollowed me out. And now they've taken that away, thinking it will make us predictable." Her smile was razor sharp. "Let's show them how wrong they are." Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed Chen. "We're in," he said. "Get those warrants ready." As he hung up, Katya's hand gripped his arm. "If Victor had anything to do with Sarah's death, I will help you make it slow." Marcus met her gaze. "First we find the truth, then we decide how the story ends." A knock at Marcus's front door pulled him from sleep, his hand automatically reaching for the weapon under his pillow. Through the security feed he saw his neighbor, Karen Anderson, shifting nervously on his porch. The time was 6:43 a.m. He disabled the security system and opened the door, noting how her eyes widened at his appearance. He hadn't slept properly since returning from Boston 3 days ago. "Marcus, I'm sorry to bother you so early," Karen said, "but I saw lights in your basement at 3 a.m. again, and there was a woman leaving your house yesterday in a suit. The police have been by twice. I'm worried about you." She had been Sarah's best friend, had held his wife's hand during the worst of the chemotherapy. She'd helped him plant the garden that first spring after Sarah's death. He owed her something close to the truth. "Come in," he said. "I'll make coffee." In the kitchen, Karen sat at the small breakfast table. Her eyes kept moving to Bailey's empty water bowl, still in its place by the back door. Neither of them had mentioned the fresh grave in the garden. "The woman you saw was an FBI agent," Marcus said, setting a mug in front of her. "The break-in wasn't random. They're investigating a connection to other crimes." "What kind of connection?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "The people who killed Bailey, they've done similar things to others. The FBI thinks it's targeted, but why? You sell rare books. You're a widower who barely leaves his house except to walk." She stopped, pain flickering across her face at the mention of walks. "Unless that's not all you are." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. In the years he'd lived here, Karen had become something like family. She deserved better than lies. "Before I met Sarah, I had a different life, different work, the kind of work that makes enemies. Karen's hands tightened around her coffee mug. Sarah knew everything. She helped me become someone else, someone better, and now that past is coming back. Marcus nodded. The FBI thinks Sarah's death might not have been natural, that someone might have accelerated her cancer somehow. The mug slipped from Karen's hands, coffee splashing across the table. Marcus had paper towels ready before the first drop hit the floor. Her hands were shaking. That's not possible, she whispered. I was there. I saw how the cancer took her. There are ways to make illness look natural. The FBI is investigating similar deaths, all connected to people like me, people who retired from certain professions. Karen stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. This is insane. You're talking about murder, about conspiracy. Sarah died of cancer. I watched it happen. I held her hand when she stopped, pressing her hands to her mouth. Marcus waited, letting her process. Finally, she turned to him. The woman who died in the hospital room next to Sarah's, the one with the same type of cancer. Marcus went very still. What about her? She had the same symptoms, the same progression. It was so similar that Sarah joked they must have the same doctor, but her doctor was different. I remember because Sarah's doctor consulted on the case, said he'd never seen that pattern before. The information settled like ice in Marcus's chest. What was the woman's name? Maria something. Her husband was some kind of military contractor. He disappeared right after her funeral. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed Chen. I need everything you can find on a cancer death at Hartford. Memorial, same time as Sarah. Patient named Maria, husband in private military. Chen was silent for a moment. Maria Kovac, husband was Serbian Special Forces turned contractor. He vanished 6 months ago after his service dog was killed in a break-in. Marcus ended the call, his mind racing. Another connection, another piece of the puzzle. In the same hospital at the same time. It couldn't be coincidence. Karen watched him, her face pale. This is really happening, isn't it? Someone really killed Sarah. I'm going to find out, and if they did, you'll kill them, she finished. It wasn't a question. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment, then squared her shoulders. What do you need from me? To be careful. These people are professionals. If they realize you might know something, I want to help. Sarah was my best friend. If someone murdered her, I want them to pay. Marcus studied her, seeing the determination beneath her suburban exterior. It's dangerous. So is letting murderers get away with killing my friend? She met his gaze steadily. I have access to hospital records through my job in administration. I can look for patterns, other cases that match. If you do this, there's no going back, no pretending you don't know. Sarah gave me the courage to leave my abusive ex-husband. She helped me rebuild my life. I owe her this. Marcus nodded slowly. Be careful. Look for similar cancer progressions, especially in spouses of military or security contractors. But don't access anything restricted. Don't draw attention. I know how to be subtle. I've worked in hospital administration for 20 years. Nobody notices the quiet woman who brings them coffee and fixes their scheduling problems. The sun was fully up now, painting Sarah's garden in morning light. Through the window, Marcus could see Bailey's grave, the earth still fresh. One more thing, he said. If anything happens to me, there's a safety deposit box at First National. The key is hidden in Sarah's rose bush, the yellow one she loved so much. Inside are documents, evidence. Make sure they get to Agent Chen. Karen touched his arm gently. Be careful, Marcus. Sarah wouldn't want you to lose yourself to vengeance. I'm not losing myself, he said softly. I'm becoming what I need to be to find the truth. After Karen left, Marcus went to his basement. Gleamed in the fluorescent light, each one a reminder of the life he'd left behind, the life that was reclaiming him piece by piece. His phone buzzed with a text from Katya. 3 words. Found something big. Marcus checked his weapons and then headed for his car. The quiet widower who walked his dog and sold rare books was gone. In his place, the undertaker emerged from retirement, ready to uncover the truth about Sarah's death, no matter the cost. In the garden, morning sunlight caught the dew on Sarah's roses, making them glitter like tears. Katya waited in a dimly lit parking garage beneath an abandoned office building in South Boston. Her posture was relaxed, but Marcus noted the slight tension in her shoulders that betrayed combat readiness. She held a laptop under one arm. You need to see this, she said without preamble, opening the laptop on the hood of her car. Data retrieved from the casino operation. Most of it is routine money laundering, but I found this buried in their communication logs. The screen showed encrypted messages, recently decoded. Marcus scanned them quickly, his blood running cold. Details about Sarah's medical medical treatment, dates of her hospital stays, even the names of her doctors. Similar information about other spouses, including Maria Kovac. They were monitoring them all, Katya said. Not just monitoring. Look at these dosage instructions. Marcus studied the numbers, remembering how quickly Sarah's condition had deteriorated. They enhanced the chemotherapy, made it more aggressive, while appearing to be standard treatment. Clever. Unless you know exactly what to look for, it appears natural. Where did these messages come from? That's the interesting part. They were sent through Petrov's network, but the encryption method is military grade. American military grade. Marcus straightened. Someone inside the government? Higher than that. Private sector, but with deep connections. Look at this routing data. She pulled up another screen. Marcus recognized the pattern immediately. Black Rose Security. You know them? Private military contractor. They handle wet work for 3-letter agencies when they need deniability. Their CEO is Alexander Wright. Katya's eyes narrowed. That name means something to you. Before Sarah, before Petrov, I did a job for Wright. High-level assassination in Dubai. The target was supposed to be alone. He wasn't. There was collateral damage. Wright's family, his wife and daughter. I didn't know they were there. Afterward, I disappeared, changed my methods. Became the Undertaker. No collateral damage, ever. And now Wright is connected to messages about killing our families. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Karen. Found more cases. Same pattern. Need to meet. Wright's getting sloppy, Katya said. These messages should have been deleted. He's not sloppy. He's arrogant. He wants us to find this. To know he's responsible. He's drawing us out. Why? If he wanted revenge, why not just kill us? Because death is too quick. He wants us to suffer like he suffered. To lose everything we love piece by piece. Marcus dialed Chen's number. I need everything you have on Alexander Wright and Black Rose Security. Already on it, Chen replied. Wright's company has government contracts worth billions. He's untouchable through official channels. Then we go unofficial. He's behind the hospital deaths. We have proof. Proof we can't use in court without revealing classified operations. Marcus, be careful. Wright has resources we can't match. He has resources. I have nothing left to lose. He ended the call and turned to Katya. Wright's using Petrov as a front, making it look like Russian organized crime. But this is personal. What's our next move? We follow the money. Black Rose has to be financing Petrov's operation somehow. His phone buzzed again. Karen, emergency. Come now. I need to meet my contact, Marcus said. Someone who has access to hospital records. I'll keep digging into Black Rose's finances. Be careful. If Wright is watching, he'll target anyone helping us. Marcus drove quickly but carefully back to Connecticut. Karen had specified a meeting at the hospital's coffee shop, a public place with security cameras. Smart. The coffee shop was busy with morning staff getting their caffeine fix. Karen sat in a corner booth, a folder on the table in front of her. Her face was pale. I found 12 cases, she said as Marcus sat down. All spouses of former military or intelligence operators, all with the same aggressive cancer progression, all treated by doctors who consulted with a specific oncology group. Black Rose Medical Consulting. Karen's eyes widened. How did you know? Because I know who's behind this. The same man who's been targeting retired operators through Petrov. There's more, Karen said, her voice shaking. I found records of payments to the oncology group. Massive consulting. Did you make copies? Everything's on this drive. She slid a USB stick across the table. I accessed some restricted files. If they check the logs, they'll know someone was looking. You need to disappear for a while. I can't just leave my job, my life. Karen, these people killed Sarah. They'll kill anyone who threatens to expose them. She squared her shoulders. Then we expose them before they can. It's not that simple. The man behind this has government connections, military contracts. He's protected. Then we find a way around his protection. Sarah deserves justice. Marcus's phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Your neighbor is quite dedicated. Shame about her car's brake lines. His blood turned to ice. Karen, did you drive here? No, I took an Uber. My car wouldn't start this morning. Why? Marcus showed her the text. Her hands began to shake. They're watching us right now, she whispered. Yes, we need to move. Now. They stood casually, as if finishing their coffee meeting. Marcus guided Karen toward the service exit, his senses alert for any threat. His phone buzzed again. Running won't help, asked Sarah. In the parking garage, Marcus put Karen in his car. I'm taking you somewhere safe, a place Wright doesn't know about. What about the evidence? Chen will protect it, but first we need to protect you. As they drove, Marcus's mind raced. raced. Wright was escalating, becoming more direct in his threats. The measured, patient man who had orchestrated Sarah's death was showing cracks in his composure. Good, angry men made mistakes, and Marcus had learned long ago how to exploit mistakes. His phone rang. Katya found something in Black Rose's records, she said without preamble. A special project called Operation Widowmaker. Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Send me everything. Already did. Marcus, this goes deeper than Wright. There are government officials involved, people who approved the cancer research. They'll pay too. All of them. Karen touched his arm gently. Sarah wouldn't want you to lose yourself to this. Sarah was murdered. Wright took everything from me. Now I'm going to return the favor. In the rearview mirror, a black SUV pulled onto the highway behind them. Marcus recognized the deliberate way it maintained distance. We're being followed, he said calmly. Hold on. The hunt was on. But this time, Wright would learn why the Undertaker's reputation had been built on more than just efficiency. It had been built on the absolute certainty that his targets never saw the killing blow coming. And Alexander Wright had just made his first serious mistake. He had revealed himself too soon, shown his hand before all his pieces were in place. Now, it was Marcus's turn to move pieces on the board, and his first move would be ensuring Karen's safety. Then he would show Wright exactly what it meant to make this personal. Marcus accelerated onto the highway exit ramp, his movements precise and controlled. The black SUV followed, maintaining its calculated distance. Karen gripped her seat, eyes wide but remarkably composed. There's a gun in the glove compartment, Marcus said calmly. Take it out, but keep it hidden. If anything happens to me, shoot anyone who approaches the car. Karen retrieved the weapon with steady hands. I took tactical shooting classes after my ex-husband made threats. Sarah encouraged me, of course. She had. Sarah had always seen the strength in people, had always pushed them to be prepared. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile as he executed a perfect reverse into a side street, forcing their pursuers to reveal themselves. Two more SUVs appeared, blocking potential escape routes. Professional work, military precision, Wright's personal security team. Not Petrov's thugs. They're herding us, Marcus said, taking a sharp turn into an industrial area. They want us somewhere specific. His phone rang. Chen, you've got multiple Black Rose tactical teams converging on your position, she said without preamble. Local police have been told to stay clear. Some bullshit about a federal operation. Wright's making his move. I'm 15 minutes out with a tactical team. Can you hold? Marcus checked his mirrors. 4 vehicles now, boxing them in with practiced efficiency. No choice. But Chen, if this goes wrong, Karen has evidence about the hospital deaths. Protect her. Just stay alive. The call ended as Marcus pulled into an abandoned warehouse lot. Perfect kill box, part of his mind noted. Multiple angles of fire. No civilian witnesses. Easy cleanup. When I stop, he told Karen, get down and stay down. No matter what you hear, what you see, do not leave this car. The SUVs surrounded them, disgorging tactically armed men in black uniforms. No logos, no identifying marks. Clean and professional. A familiar figure emerged from the lead vehicle. Alexander Wright had aged well, suit projecting his silver authority. Only his eyes revealed the predator beneath, cold and calculating, as they fixed on Marcus. The Undertaker himself, Wright called out, finally out of retirement. I've waited a long time for this. Marcus stepped out of his car, keeping his body between the tactical teams and Karen. Using cancer to kill innocent women. Not very professional, Alexander. Professional? Wright's voice hardened. Was it professional when you killed my wife and daughter? When you turned a clean hit into a bloodbath? That was before I learned precision and I learned patience. Watching you build your quiet little life. Watching you fall in love, play at being normal, then watching that love die slowly, painfully, while you could do nothing but hold her hand. Marcus's fingers twitched toward his weapon. Sarah was innocent. So was Claire. So was Amy, my wife and daughter Marcus. They were shopping. Claire wanted to surprise me for my birthday. Wrong place, wrong time. And now you're recreating that pain, spreading it to others who never hurt you. Wright smiled, a cold expression devoid of humanity. The others were practice, perfecting the method, learning how to enhance chemotherapy. Without detection, but you, Marcus, you were always the real target. A rifle laser dot appeared on Marcus's chest, another on his forehead. Professional work. Your neighbor dies next, Wright said conversationally. Another slow death, then anyone else you try to help. You'll live, Marcus. Live to watch everyone. You care about suffer? Marcus appeared to slump, defeat weighing his shoulders. You've thought of everything. I learned from the best. The Undertaker, the ghost who never left witnesses, who struck from shadows and disappeared. I studied your methods, Marcus. I became you. Almost everything, Marcus said softly. Wright frowned. What? You forgot the first rule of assassination. Never monologue. The warehouse behind Wright exploded. Not a massive blast, but precisely targeted charges that Marcus had placed weeks ago. He'd known someday someone would try to trap him here. The Undertaker always prepared. In the chaos that followed, Marcus moved with liquid grace. 3 shots, 3 kills before Wright's men could react. Another explosion, this one from charges under their vehicles. Katya's sniper rifle barked from a nearby rooftop, picking off targets with surgical precision. She'd been in position for hours, waiting. Wright ran for cover, his professional mask cracking. Marcus pursued, ignoring the firefight around him. This was between them now. He caught Wright behind a burning SUV, slammed him against the metal hard enough to crack ribs. The cancer treatment. Tell me how to prove it. Kill me, Wright spat. That's what you want. No, I want justice. For Sarah, for all of them. There is no justice. Only pain passed from one person to another. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Chen's team arriving at last. Wright laughed, blood staining his teeth. They can't touch me. I have contingencies, protection at the highest levels. Kill me, and it all gets buried. Marcus pressed his gun to Wright's temple. Last chance. Give me something I can use to expose this. Like what? The records Karen stole? Encrypted files that could have come from anywhere? My word against an international assassin? No, your own records. The ones in your personal safe. The ones detailing every death, every payment, every person involved. Your insurance policy. Wright's eyes widened slightly. The first rule of men like him, always keep leverage over your allies. How did you? I am the Undertaker. I've been in your house every night this week, gathering evidence while you plotted this trap. Chen has everything. Impossible. My security was focused on watching me here, watching Karen, while Katya copied every file, planted every charge. You forgot the second rule, Alexander. The Undertaker never works alone. Chen's tactical team breached the warehouse perimeter. Wright struggled, but Marcus held him easily. Sarah died in pain, Marcus said softly, believing I was with her out of love, not knowing she was a target. You made her death mean nothing. Then kill me. Complete the cycle. Marcus stepped back. No, death is too easy. You're going to live, Alexander. Live to watch everything you built crumble. Live to see justice done in the light, not the shadows. He turned right over to Chen's team. The evidence was irrefutable. Black Rose's experiments, the targeted deaths, the corruption, it would all come out. Karen emerged from the car as medics, treated Wright's injuries. She was pale but steady. Sarah would be proud, she said softly. You chose justice over vengeance. Marcus watched Wright being loaded into a police vehicle. Justice is its own kind of vengeance. He'll die in prison, knowing his legacy is destroyed. But as the adrenaline faded, a hollow Sarah was still gone. Bailey's grave was still fresh in the garden. Justice didn't fill the void they'd left. His phone buzzed. A message from Chen. There's more. Wright wasn't working alone. Someone higher up authorized the experiments. Marcus squared his shoulders. The Undertaker's work wasn't finished, but now he had a team, had purpose beyond mere vengeance. Sarah had believed in justice, in doing what was right, not just what felt right. He would honor that belief, hunting the guilty not from the shadows, but in the light of day. Wright had tried to recreate the pain of losing loved ones. Instead, he'd created something else, a mission, a purpose, a way to transform grief into justice. The sun rose over the burning warehouse, painting the sky the color of Sarah's roses. Marcus sat in Chen's FBI office, studying the documents spread across her desk. Each page revealed another layer of Wright's operation, another piece of the conspiracy that had taken Sarah from him. But it was the classified military memo that held his attention. Operation Widowmaker wasn't Wright's idea, Chen said, pointing to a signature at the bottom. It was authorized by Secretary Charles Hammond. He saw potential in Wright's desire for revenge. They weaponized cancer treatment, Katya said from her position by the window. Used Wright's personal vendetta as cover for testing enhanced chemotherapy protocols. Marcus touched a photo of Hammond, the man's aristocratic features, twisted in a politician's practice smile. Why? Untraceable assassinations, Chen replied. Cancer deaths raise no alarms. Perfect for eliminating problematic foreign leaders, dissidents, anyone they want removed quietly. And we were the test subjects, Katya said bitterly. Our families sacrificed to prove the concept. Marcus studied another document, this one detailing the specific modifications made to Sarah's treatment. Each alteration had been calculated to cause maximum suffering while maintaining the appearance of natural progression. The precision of it made his blood run cold. Hammond is protected, Chen continued. Presidential appointee, connections. Throughout Washington, Wright's evidence won't be enough to touch him. Then we get more evidence, Marcus said. Where would Hammond keep his records? His private estate in Virginia, former plantation, heavily secured. But Marcus, this is different than Wright. Going after a cabinet secretary is justice, he finished. For Sarah, for all of them. Katya moved to study the estate's security plans. Getting in will be difficult. Government security, private contractors, surveillance satellites. Then we do it officially, Chen said. I have a warrant request ready, if we can prove the connection to Wright. Hammond will bury everything before that warrant clears, Marcus interrupted. He has too many friends in high places. So we do it your way, Katya asked. The Undertaker's way? Marcus stood, looking out Chen's window at the Washington skyline. In the reflection, he saw Sarah's face, remembered her belief in doing things right rather than easy. No, not the old way. Something new. Hammond expects violence, expects us to come at him like Wright did with me. So we use that. Chen leaned forward. What are you thinking? We make him reveal himself, force him to exercise his power publicly where everyone can see it. How? By threatening the one thing men like Hammond truly care about, legacy. Marcus outlined his plan. It was audacious, complex, requiring precision, timing, and perfect coordination. But if it worked, Hammond would destroy himself. It could work, Chen said slowly. But the risk is necessary, Marcus finished. Hammond believes he's untouchable because he holds all the power. We show the world that power is his weakness. Katya smiled, a predator's expression. I like it. When do we start? Now, Chen, I need everything you have on Hammond's public appearances for the next week. Katya, get close to his security detail. Learn their routines. What about you? Chen asked. I'm going to have a very public conversation with a very private man. The pieces moved into place over the next 3 days. Katya infiltrated Hammond's security team through a connection in the private contractor world. Chen gathered intelligence on Hammond's movements, his patterns, his weaknesses. Marcus waited until Hammond's weekly lunch at an exclusive DC restaurant. The Secretary of Defense always ate alone at the same corner table, a power move showing he needed no companions. Today, that solitude would be his undoing. Marcus walked into the restaurant dressed in an expensive suit, projecting wealthy confidence. The maitre d' tried to stop him, but a flash of a diplomatic credential borrowed from one of Chen's contacts smoothed the way. Hammond looked up from his salad as Marcus sat down uninvited. Recognition flickered in his eyes, quickly masked. Mr. This is a surprise. I thought it was time we discussed Operation Widowmaker, specifically your role in my wife's death. Hammond's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Around them, other diners continued their meals, unaware of the tension crackling between the two men. I'm not familiar with that operation, Hammond said carefully. And your wife died of natural causes. Natural causes enhanced by your experimental protocols. Wright was thorough in his record-keeping. Alexander Wright is a disturbed individual, making baseless accusations. Then you won't mind if I share his evidence with the Washington Post. They're very interested in stories about government officials experimenting on innocent civilians. Hammond's mask cracked slightly. That would be unwise. Classified information is protected for a reason, like the classified memo authorizing the use of enhanced chemotherapy on American citizens, the one with your signature. Making accusations without proof is dangerous, Mr. Cole, especially for someone with your history. Marcus smiled, letting the Undertaker show in his eyes. I'm not making accusations. I'm giving you a chance to get ahead of the story. Resign, cooperate with investigators, and maybe you keep some of your legacy intact. Or everything. O comes out. Every death, every experiment, every dollar spent developing ways to kill people with cancer. Your name will be synonymous with atrocity. Hammond dabbed his lips with a napkin. You have 30 seconds to leave before I call security. Already done, Marcus said as uniformed men approached. But ask yourself this. How many other copies of Wright's evidence are out there? How many more witnesses will come forward once the story breaks? He stood, straightening his suit. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Choose wisely. The security team escorted him out. In the street, Katya's voice came through his earpiece. Hammond's making calls, multiple secured lines. Good, Marcus said. Let him run his plays. Every person he calls is another connection we can expose. Chen's voice joined in. Surveillance. Teams are in position. We're tracking everything. Marcus walked calmly to his car. The game was in motion. Hammond would react exactly as expected, using his power and influence to try to contain the situation. And in doing so, he would create the very evidence they needed to bring him down. Sarah had believed in justice, served in the light. Tomorrow, that light would shine on every dark corner of Hammond's operation. The Undertaker's greatest mission wasn't about killing, it was about truth. Marcus watched the morning news coverage from Chen's office. Secretary Hammond's press conference was going exactly as planned. The career politician stood at his podium, radiating righteous indignation as he denounced baseless accusations and conspiracy theories. These allegations are a desperate attempt to tarnish the reputation of dedicated public servants, Hammond declared. I have authorized a full investigation to clear my name. He's calling in every favor, Chen said, monitoring communications traffic. Judges, regulators, fellow cabinet members, all being pressured to publicly support him. Perfect, Marcus replied. The more people he drags in, the more connections we can expose. Katya entered, still wearing her security contractor uniform. Hammond's ordered his estate swept for surveillance. He's paranoid, making mistakes. The second phase began at precisely 10 a.m. The Washington Post published their first article on Operation Widowmaker, carefully crafted to include just enough classified information to force Hammond's hand. His response was immediate and overwhelming. Federal marshals raided the Post's offices with national security warrants. Similar raids hit other news organizations that had begun investigating the story. He's burning his political capital fast, Chen observed. These raids will backfire once the full story breaks. When do we move? Katya asked. Marcus checked his watch. Now. They drove to Hammond's estate in Virginia, Chen's FBI credentials clearing them through the gates. The secretary himself was in Washington, dealing with the growing media crisis. Inside his study, Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, Katya covering the door while Chen documented everything. The safe behind the painting was exactly where Wright's files had indicated. The combination, obtained through weeks of surveillance, worked perfectly. My God, Chen whispered, examining the contents. Medical records, payment authorizations, death certificates. He kept trophies. Men like Hammond believe they're untouchable, Marcus said. Their arrogance makes them predictable. The final piece was Hammond's personal ledger, detailing every person involved in Operation Widowmaker. Politicians, doctors, military officials, a web of corruption and complicity that reached into every branch of government. When alarms blared, Hammond had returned early. Right on schedule, Marcus said calmly. Chen? She nodded, securing the evidence in her briefcase. FBI tactical teams are in position. The moment he threatens us, they move. Katya? The former operative smiled coldly. Snipers are covering every angle. He's not getting away. They heard Hammond's voice in the hallway, demanding answers from his security team. Marcus sat in the secretary's chair, positioned to face the door. Hammond burst in, flanked by private security. He froze at the sight of Marcus behind his desk. This is a secure facility, he sputtered. How dare you? We were just reviewing your personal files, Marcus said pleasantly. Fascinating reading, especially the parts about targeting specific cancer treatments to maximize suffering. Hammond's face purpled. Kill them, he ordered his security team. National security authorization. The mercenaries raised their weapons. Before they could fire, FBI tactical teams crashed through windows and doors, filling the room with controlled chaos. Secretary Hammond, Chen said formally, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and violation of international law. You can't touch me, Hammond sneered. One phone call and this all disappears. Make your call. Marcus stood. Every news organization in the country just received copies of your files. Your political allies are already distancing themselves. Wright's evidence was just the beginning. You're a killer, Hammond spat. The Undertaker. No one will believe you. They'll believe the evidence. Every death you ordered, every experiment you authorized. Sarah's death will be avenged in the light, not the shadows. As FBI agents led Hammond away, Marcus felt a strange lightness. This was justice, as Sarah would have wanted it. Not revenge, revenge, but truth exposed to the world. Katya touched his arm. It's not over. There will be trials, hearings. Good, Marcus said. Let everyone see what they did. Let no one forget. Chen secured the last of the evidence. Hammond's allies will try to bury this. They can try, Marcus replied, but some truths refuse to stay buried. In his pocket, he touched the small photo of Sarah he always carried. She had believed in doing what was right, not what was easy, in bringing justice through truth rather than violence. The Undertaker had been born in shadows, dealing death from darkness, but Sarah had shown him a better way, and now, finally, her death would serve to expose corruption to the light. Outside, reporters gathered as Hammond was led to a waiting FBI vehicle. His carefully crafted image of power and respectability crumbled with each flash of cameras. Marcus watched from the study window, remembering Sarah's smile, Bailey's loyal devotion. Their deaths had been meant to break him, to create another weapon of vengeance. Instead, they had created something else, a force for justice, working in the light rather than the shadows. The Undertaker's greatest mission wasn't killing, it was truth. The federal courthouse buzzed with tension as Marcus took the witness stand. Hammond sat at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide how prison had diminished him. Wright occupied the chair beside him, both men bound by their crimes, if not their motivations. Marcus testified for hours, his voice steady as he detailed Operation Widowmaker, the enhanced chemotherapy protocols, the targeted deaths, Sarah's final days, unknowingly caught in their web of experimentation. In the gallery, Karen wiped tears as she listened to the clinical details of her friend's murder. Hammond's defense team tried to discredit him, to paint him as a violent man seeking revenge, but the evidence was overwhelming. Wright's records, Hammond's personal files, testimony from doctors and officials involved in the program. The truth could not be buried. During a recess, Chen found Marcus in the courthouse hallway. Jury's going to convict, but there's something else. We found Victor Petrov, Marcus straightened. Where? Safe house in Montreal. He's offering to testify against Hammond in exchange for protection. Protection from whom? Everyone. The Beige. Russians want him dead for working with Hammond. The Americans want him silenced. He's a loose end that needs tying up. Marcus considered this. Petrov had been the tool Hammond and Wright used to draw out their targets, the man who had ordered Bailey's death. I want to speak with him, Marcus said. Chen hesitated. This needs to stay official, Marcus. No revenge killings. No, this isn't about revenge anymore. It's about completing the truth. The safe house was a nondescript apartment building under heavy guard. Petrov sat at a metal table, his once imposing frame withered by months in hiding. He looked up as Marcus entered. The Undertaker, he said softly. Come to finish our business? I came to understand why. You knew what they would do. Petrov shrugged. Money at first, then leverage. Hammond promised protection from my enemies. And Bailey, the other pets? Wright's idea. He studied you. Studied all of you, knew what would hurt most. I simply provided the men to carry it out. Marcus sat across from him. You could have warned us and face Hammond's retaliation. The man corrupted cancer treatment to kill his enemies. What do you think he would have done to me? So you chose to be his weapon. I chose to survive. Not all of us found redemption in love like you did. Marcus studied the man who had once been his greatest rival. Testify. Tell everything. Make your survival mean something. And then what? Protection in some remote location, a new identity, then you get what Hammond and Wright never will. A chance to choose a different path. Petrov was silent for a long moment. Your wife, she made you soft. She made me better, strong enough to choose justice over vengeance. Back at the courthouse, the jury returned with their verdict. Hammond and Wright stood as the forewoman read the charges, guilty on all counts. Marcus watched from the gallery as the men were led away. Wright's face was a mask of hatred, but Hammond had crumbled, his power and influence stripped away to reveal the hollow man beneath. Karen touched his hand. Sarah would be proud of you. This is what she believed in, justice in the light. Not just Sarah, Marcus said. Everyone they killed, every family they destroyed. They all deserved to see this day. Chen joined them as the courtroom emptied. Petrov's testimony sealed it. No appeals, no deals. They'll die in prison. And the others? The doctors? The officials? We're tracking them down. This goes deeper than we thought. More operations, more deaths. Marcus nodded. Then we keep going, keep bringing truth to light. The Undertaker working for justice, Katya said, appearing beside them. Who would have believed it? Not the Undertaker anymore, Marcus replied. Something new, something better. Outside, reporters clamored for statements. Marcus let Chen handle the press while he walked with Karen to Sarah's garden. Bailey's grave had sprouted wildflowers, nature's tribute to loyal love. What will you do now? Karen asked. Marcus touched the fresh earth gently. Help Chen track down the others involved. Make sure no one else dies like Sarah did. She always said you had a good heart under all that darkness. She helped me find it again. The least I can do is use it the way she would have wanted. The sun set over the garden, painting Sarah's roses in shades of gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles for justice. But today, watching Hammond and Wright face their crimes, Marcus had fulfilled his promise to Sarah, not through violence or vengeance, but through unwavering pursuit of truth. The Undertaker had been born in shadow, but Sarah had shown him how to walk in light. 1 year later, Marcus knelt in Sarah's garden, carefully planting new roses. Beside him, a young golden retriever named Hope watched with eager attention, so much like Bailey had once done. The trials were over. Hammond and Wright served life sentences, their appeals exhausted. Petrov had testified against every person involved in Operation Widowmaker, then disappeared into witness protection. Justice had been served in the light, just as Sarah would have wanted. Chen pulled into his driveway, file folders under her arm. She smiled at Hope's enthusiastic greeting. New case, she said, settling into a garden chair. Another secret. Program. More families at risk. We could use your help. Marcus brushed dirt from his hands. Tell me. He listened as she outlined the operation. More corrupt officials. More innocent lives at stake. The work was never truly finished. Karen brought out lemonade, taking her usual seat. She had become part of their team, her hospital administration skills proving invaluable in tracking suspicious medical patterns. I found 3 more cases, she said. Same signature as Widowmaker, but different players. The evidence we exposed inspired copycats, Chen added. People thinking they can recreate Hammond's work. Then we stop them too, Marcus said simply. Hope rested her head on his knee, brown eyes full of devotion. She had been a rescue, abandoned and mistrustful, like Marcus himself once was, before Sarah showed him a better way. Katya emerged from the house, having let herself in as usual. The new target has protection, government contracts, political connections, just like Hammond did, Marcus replied. We know how to handle that now. They worked late into the evening, planning their next mission, not as assassins or soldiers, but as seekers of truth. The skills Marcus had learned as the Undertaker now served a different purpose. The sun set over Sarah's garden, painting her roses in familiar gold. On the porch, Marcus watched Hope play with Karen. Life continuing, healing happening, just as Sarah had always believed it would. You were right, he said softly to Sarah's memory. There are better ways to fight darkness than becoming it. Chen called him back. To work to the endless task of exposing corruption and protecting innocent lives. The Undertaker's skills had been born in shadow, but Sarah had taught him to use them in light. He had lost everything, but found a new purpose. Not in dealing death, but in preserving life. Not in vengeance, but in justice. Hope bounded up the porch steps, dropping a ball at his feet. Marcus smiled, remembering Bailey doing the same. Some wounds never fully healed, but they could be transformed into strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles for truth. But tonight, in Sarah's garden, surrounded by friends who had become family, Marcus Cole was at peace. He had kept his promise to Sarah, not by burying his skills, but by using them to protect others from suffering as she had. The Undertaker was gone, replaced by something better, something worthy of the love that had saved him. Hope barked, impatient for play. Marcus threw her ball, watching her bound through the garden with joyful abandon. Life went on. Love healed. Truth prevailed. In the growing darkness, Sarah's roses bloomed, their fragrance a reminder that even after the deepest loss, beauty could grow again. Chen gestured him back to work. Another mission, another chance to bring light to shadow. Marcus gave Hope one final pat and returned to the task of serving justice, not for vengeance now, but for hope, for truth, for love, for Sarah.